Now back to the Bears Den with Drake Toll for a Baylor take on your lunch break.
Welcome back into the Petty Clinic Low T Bears Den. Happy Thursday, Thursday, everybody. May 13th, rocking and rolling with a big weekend of Baylor athletics coming up. You got track and field in Manhattan for the Big 12 championships, Baylor softball in the Big 12 championships, men's tennis in the final 24 in the national championship tournament, final 16, I should say, and Baylor baseball taking on Oklahoma State up in Stillwater. Joining the show now to help us break down the national scale of college baseball, Baylor baseball, and how Baylor fits in the national scale is Noah Darling of CWS 24/7 on Twitter. Noah, thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, no problem. It's a great opportunity, and as a fellow Big 12 fan, despite not having a baseball team, it's an honor to be able to come on a fellow Big 12 brethren show.
Yeah, there you go. Noah, first and foremost on that front, you know, you've got a pretty good following when it comes to Twitter and your site, the content you put out with college baseball. Iowa State doesn't have a baseball team. How did you get started with this?
I really don't think I would be too into it if I didn't live in Omaha, because it's just that hard to get into. But yeah, that's a really interesting question. I don't know how I became an Iowa State fan, and I certainly don't know how I became a college baseball fan. But I think they're both great fits for me. They're prime examples of what I really strive for, and I think that it's a really good fit for me for both sports. And I really appreciate the opportunity that have come from both, really.
I love it. Noah, looking at the scope of collegiate baseball right now, and obviously we cover things from a Baylor perspective, I want to give you my first questions very broad. I mean, this is very open, very broad, and that is, where the hell did Baylor baseball come from?
I think it starts with coaching and development. You look at Steve Rodriguez, he's done a great job. Baylor was projected very poorly to begin the year in the Big 12, and I think that was a miscalculation. And then they went ahead and they started poorly to back that up. But you look at they won four straight Big 12 series. They are excellent against the teams they're supposed to be excellent against. They have one of the best offenses in the country. I think they rank 8th in overall batting average in the country. And you don't really hear people talking about Baylor baseball, but I think they're going to be an extremely dangerous 2 seed. And I think that if it was a normal year where we were getting announced, here are your top 16 seeds after the Big 12 tournament, I think Baylor could have an outside shot at that 1 seed. But with those being announced tomorrow, I don't think there's any way. But I think that they have the opportunity to play themselves into an incredibly high 2 seed, which I think that's where they're at right now. Or they have the opportunity to play themselves down in that 3 seed range. But I do think they are squarely in the tournament right now.
What I see, Noah, when I look at Baylor baseball and coming into this season, especially after that first weekend, the opening 2 weekends, it looked like Baylor wouldn't make the postseason. They weren't projected early in the year to make the postseason, and they were playing about where folks thought they would be. Was there ever a point, even before the year, where you thought, all right, Baylor baseball could be a contender?
Not really. Baylor was not on the radar to begin the year, certainly not. I remember back in 2019 where they were the team. They were that team that in the Big 12, this team could be really dangerous, the Shea Langoliers of the world. But now, no, it just wasn't on the radar. But now they are definitely one of the teams, especially just taking a little bit of a deeper dive into them. This is a team that if I'm a 1 seed, I really, really do not want to see them in my regional.
Along with that, we talked earlier in the show about the pitching staff that Baylor's put together now and what Helton has been able to do, Hayden Kettler's been able to do. You've got, obviously, Tyler Thomas, your Friday night guy, some of the younger arms that are throwing out there. And then on the side of the lineup, Jack Pineda, Trey Richardson, Jared McKenzie, Andy Thomas. Who are some of those guys maybe that stick out to you, or what is it about this team that's going to make them dangerous moving forward?
Andy Thomas is your prototypical what makes college baseball great. Just listening to him on the show yesterday when you had him on, he was one of those guys where you listen to him and you can see Baylor going on a run. One of those guys is going to challenge the guys in the dugout. He has that leadership. You really like having a catcher that can lead the team. When you think about catchers who lead, the Bolster Posies of the world, the Adley Rutschmans of the world, those guys succeed. Those guys go to Omaha. I think that Baylor has that opportunity because of that leadership that they have with him. And then on the mound, Tyler Thomas, nobody's talking about Tyler Thomas. Tyler Thomas is incredible. I think that with those two, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw Baylor win the Big 12 championship. And like I said earlier, that would have really helped their postseason resume if the NCAA hadn't messed up the selection this year.
Looking through what we've got in Big 12 play, Baylor opens up 1-5 against TCU and Texas. And at that point in the season, people had a good beat, a good idea that TCU and Texas would both be top teams in the Big 12. But they've emerged as top teams in the country, two powerhouse programs this season. So how much do you take away from Baylor going 1 for 6 in those games against TCU and Texas?
I think there's something there when you talk about eventually you're going to have to, like if Baylor's going to go to Omaha, they're going to have to likely beat a 1 seed in a super regional and obviously in their regional. But I think that you're looking better upon it when you look at that Texas Tech series where Baylor didn't just win, they went ahead and had no trouble scoring against Texas Tech. And that's a good Texas Tech team who probably has a little bit better talent overall. They just quite haven't put it all together. I think those teams have the opportunity to be national seeds, and it is a little bit concerning with that TCU sweep. But overall, I think with the way the season has gone forward, you've really seen Baylor grow, and that was evident in the Texas Tech series. And then you've really seen the offense really put it all together in that Kansas State series.
Along with it, I'm looking up and down the schedule, and Baylor has not been able to complete a sweep in the last 4 series, but they have won each of the last 4 series against Kansas, Kansas State. They knocked off West Virginia, and then also got a win against Texas Tech in Lubbock. With those series, Baylor playing as well as they have, going 8-4. Did you expect that? Could anybody have expected that, especially the way they started Big 12 play?
I don't think so. I'm sure that the people who are close to the Baylor program knew the leadership that they had there with the Andy Thomases of the world and that pitching staff that has a lot of depth. I think that Baylor is a team that was always a little bit dangerous, but I don't think anybody was talking about them being a 2 seed. I think when they beat Texas Tech, that was really when people started to take notice. And you see them now as a 2 seed pretty much across the board. And I know I have them as a very high 2 seed right now.
Basketball, the game of college basketball is streaky as all get out. One team gets hot and they can go on a run and win 7 or 8 games, especially games they're not supposed to. The game of baseball can be different. You can go out, win a series against Texas Tech, lose to Texas Southern, and then sweep Texas. Anybody can. How streaky is baseball in general, and how much confidence does a win streak or a hot streak like Baylor's on right now give this team?
I think baseball is relatively streaky during the regular season, but I think during the postseason, you generally see a lot of chalk. People like to think that the NCAA baseball tournament is one of the better setups for really anybody to win, but they're Cinderella for a reason. When they get to Omaha, it just doesn't happen very often. But I think that the 1s and the 2 seeds of the world have the opportunity to run right through regional. It's amazing how quickly regionals go by every year just because these teams, they go and they take care of business. But I think that Baylor has a fantastic opportunity with their regular season run to really give them that high 2 seed. And that's certainly something that's only going to help. It's obviously a good thing to win games. So I don't think it has long-term effects as much as short-term. But I do think that it's good to see a team string together a bunch of wins over teams you're supposed to beat, because that's really undervalued. It is important to finish off sweeps, though, which we would love to see Baylor do in Stillwater this weekend.
Noah, is there another team that you've covered or watched in collegiate baseball over the last couple of years that you would compare this Baylor team to that you really liked moving into late season or postseason play?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say you mentioned it earlier on the show, so it feels like it's a little bit recency bias, but Coastal Carolina a little bit in terms of they're a little bit slept on, but that feels like a lazy answer. Maybe like an Arizona in 2016 who played Coastal Carolina in the national championship, but they went on the road in Starkville and won a super regional that nobody really thought they were going to win. So there are a few teams that are like this that can really, really tear the cover off the ball and put up runs in a hurry. So it's hard to pinpoint an exact one, but there have certainly been several. It's hard to do it because Baylor is not quite on that level of national champion favorite. So it's hard to find those trendy 2 seeds, but I think that there are a lot of those this year. Like I would say that they compare a lot to Pittsburgh, just in terms of you don't want to see them.
Along with it, Noah, before we go forward to the series against Oklahoma State this weekend and moving into Oklahoma, your thoughts on the Kansas State series? I know some of those numbers were gaudy. The 17 runs in game 1, 23 in game 3, and the 17-run inning. That's almost unheard of.
it's not very often you look at a team's last 6 games and you see a total of 60 runs, or 5 games of 60 runs. And that one loss coming to Jordan Wicks, who is an elite arm, probably the second best arm in the Big 12. Ty Madden might have a word, but it is incredible to see those kind of runs put up, and it just shows that Baylor can score with anybody in the country, and I think that that's exactly what makes them dangerous, is just how well they can hit the ball. And like I said, that leadership that they have. Thomas yesterday was talking about how well he can just challenge the next guy behind him. Well, I got 3 hits today. You only got 2. What are you going to do for me tomorrow? I think that he is the exact type of guy that can lead this Baylor team past where the preseason projections had them, where he's already done that, and into the postseason. And I would not be surprised at all if we saw Baylor in a super regional.
When you're looking across the country and seeing names like Kumar Rocker or Kevin Kopps, I mean, you've got some elite pitching across the nation. Is it better this season to have one of those ace elite arms or an offense that is putting up numbers like Baylor?
I've always thought it was a strong mixture of both. Obviously, it's a perfect recipe. But I think this year in particular, you're really going to want to be able to hit the ball because of how many of those pitchers that you can just rattle off: the Kumars, the Jack Leiter, the Kopps out of the bullpen. I don't think anybody has been able to hit Kevin Kopps. You look at the Big 12, a few excellent closers as well, and I think that the ability to string hits together is really underrated. It's the small ball era is on its way out, and people want to see the big fly. And I think that if Baylor can perform the small ball, you're going to be able to get to the Kumars if Baylor were to run into that one of them.
Moving forward, Noah, looking at this weekend, a big series against Oklahoma State in Stillwater, 6 p.m. tomorrow, another night game, 6 p.m. on Saturday, and then a 1 o'clock start on Sunday. I mean, this is a big one for both squads. Both teams trying to bolster their postseason resumes. Whoever wins this series, it could end up being the difference in a 2 or a 3 seed going into the postseason. What do you make of Baylor OSU in Stillwater?
Both teams have a fantastic opportunity, like you said, to improve their resume. Oklahoma State right now is borderline not in the tournament at all. They if they get swept, you could easily and probably will see them outside of the tournament come Monday in a lot of projections. But Baylor, I don't know how much of an opportunity they really have to bolster their resume. I think that when you're squared into that high 2 seed with regional sides literally being announced tomorrow, you can't really improve your resume that much. But I would say that keeping that 2 seed is important. That way you can handle the 3 seed, and then you can really start to manage the way you pitch, manage the way you prepare for opponents in regional play, and then the super regionals, hopefully. But I think Oklahoma State absolutely has to deliver, and I think Baylor has a fantastic opportunity to silence their opponent and maybe put a little bit of a cap on this Big 12 race for 4th.
How big is it, too, if Baylor is able to sneak that 3 seed on top of Texas Tech in Big 12 play? Obviously, the Bears have that tiebreaker over the Red Raiders, but it's tight right now. Is it going to make a difference between the 3 and the 4 seed in Big 12 conference standings, really?
I don't really know, other than lining up with with Texas, I believe is a 2 seed. It doesn't really make that big. Either way, you're going to have to beat the top dogs to win a Big 12 championship. And with the way the NCAA has set up the tournament selection, you can't really improve your resume, which is really unfortunate. So it doesn't make a huge difference, but it is something to play for. It's something to pride yourself on. And I think Baylor has the opportunity to maybe turn some heads, even though it may not be all that important come seeding time.
With Oklahoma State, I'm looking up and down their schedule going into this season. I mean, it's fairly comparable to Baylor's, aside from the fact that OSU, rather than getting hot at the right time, really hasn't been that great lately. What have you done for me lately looking at this team? Going into the weekend, what is your confidence level that Baylor's able to pull out a victory, even though it's in Stillwater, which is not an easy place to play?
I feel pretty confident that Baylor can win at least 2 of 3 there. They're playing incredibly hot right now. Their offense is fantastic. Oklahoma State just can't really keep up with the bats. And I think that when you look at Baylor, you see a team that they're really coming to their own right now. You don't want to play Baylor. Their leadership, Andy Thomas was talking about how excited he is to go play that series. That speaks a lot to me. Who's excited to go to Stillwater, Oklahoma? Andy Thomas is. And I think that that speaks volumes about where Baylor's at right now, and we know where Oklahoma State's at right now. They're not in a good spot. They were talking about hosting a few weeks ago, and now they're talking about we got to play to get back in the tournament.
Yeah. Along with it, moving into the Oklahoma series, OU is one of those teams. I compare them to Auburn. I think there were expectations that were there for Oklahoma, especially around the fan base, that they thought this was going to be a solid baseball season for them. They've had a couple of good years the last two, and they've really fallen off. I mean, just kind of dropped off the table in the Big 12 this season. When you look at Oklahoma and Baylor, that series being in Waco, is that a great chance for the Bears to even pull out a conference sweep to end this thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think that Oklahoma has had a tough go of things. They started the year, and their very first series of the year was canceled. Then they went ahead and played my now alma mater, UNO, and they struggled against a Summit League team that is fighting for a tournament spot in their own right. But the Bears have the fantastic opportunity to realistically win at least 5 of 6, maybe even 6 of 6 to end the season. And we're going to be talking about one of the hotter teams in the country headed into postseason play. Whether they can roll that into the Big 12 tournament immediately or not is something to be seen. And I'm not sure if you want to win in the Big 12 tournament, as odd as that is. We know in basketball, it's sometimes a little bit of a curse to go win the Big 12 tournament. In baseball, I don't really know how well teams have done, but I think that it's something to think about. You don't lose on purpose, but I think that it's important to stay hot, but you don't want to have to win like 15 games in a row to win a national championship.
See, LSU wins the SEC tournament every year, it seems like. And when's the last time Paul Maneri brought home a national championship to Baton Rouge? So I think you're onto something. That winning, you drain yourself when you win your conference tournament because it's just such a daunting weekend or week for a lot of these conferences. Noah, you released your top 16. And the NCAA will soon do its same, where it'll name the host sites. I'm looking near the bottom of this. You're seeing your Louisville, who is not the Louisville of old, not a Louisville team that you'd expect to see. Oregon, Stanford, Florida State, Louisiana Tech, of maybe that 10 to 16 range. If Baylor's to be a 2 seed and a 2 seed in those regionals, what is the most favorable matchup for the Bears?
I would think that Louisiana Tech would be an extremely favorable matchup, but for that, you would have to be according to my rankings, the best 2 seed. I would say that Florida State is a very susceptible team. I don't really like Florida State, but they've been playing well lately. Not as well as Baylor, but they just recently took 2 or 3 from a very good Notre Dame team. I think that when you look at some of those teams, they're very susceptible to those good 2 seeds, of which there are a lot of this year. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a lot of 2 seeds make the Supers. Baylor's going to be very high on my 2 seed list. So I would think that they would do very well against Florida State, definitely Louisiana Tech. Could see them doing well against Louisville. Louisville's RPI is in the mid-50s. Baylor checks in at 34. So I think that you look at Louisville and Florida State, those ACC teams, Louisiana Tech, certainly teams that I could see them slipping out of that top 16. And if they do host, that's maybe a matchup I like for Baylor.
Noah, when you're looking across the Big 12, you're seeing teams like Texas, TCU, Texas Tech, now Baylor, Oklahoma State still in that conversation, and even OU can be sneaky. Kansas State took a series against Texas Tech. I mean, this is a tough conference. Up and down, this is a tough conference. Where do you rank it amongst conferences in collegiate baseball?
I think it's the second best conference in the country behind the SEC. I think that the Big 12 is one of those where you've seen Baylor struggle to finish off sweeps. That's really where you define how tough a conference is not how often do you necessarily go on the road and win a series. It's how often do you finish off that sweep. And I think that that's helped a little bit by some looser attendance restrictions this season in the Big 12 as opposed to the Pac-12. And you've seen home field make a little bit of a difference. And I do think that the Big 12 easily checks in at number 2. And the SEC is untouchable, but I think the Big 12 is squarely in second place.
I love it. And Baylor right there with a chance to vie for to be in the top third of the Big 12 coming up this weekend against Oklahoma State. Noah, moving into postseason play, I'd love for you to get specific too. What is the best case scenario for Baylor to be able to make it to Omaha? Some of those teams they'd like to run into, whether it be in a super or in a regional, and don't say Arkansas.
I don't think anybody's best case scenario involves seeing Arkansas. I would say that the best case scenario would be getting as high of a 2 seed as possible and going out and getting in that Ruston, Louisiana Tech regional, getting paired up with Florida State, Louisville, a team that maybe even a team that went out and won their conference that maybe shouldn't have, like Georgia could sneak in, not to a 1 seed, scratch Georgia, but somebody along those lines, somebody who really doesn't deserve to have that 1 seed. And I think that Baylor is, the way they're playing and the way that they're statistically they line up is almost on that 1 seed line. So I would think that your best case scenario is to go out and get that week 1 seed and then beat them and then win right away, win out in the regional, and then be fresh for a super regional appearance against hopefully a 2 seed. But I think that Baylor can compete with a lot of those top 8 seeds. I would say a bad scenario for the Big 12 overall would be being lined up with Texas Tech, or TCU. I don't know if that would be bad for Baylor specifically, but I would look out for Baylor to be playing a 2 seed in the super regional to feel really confident about the Bears having a fair shake. But I believe that the deal with super regionals this year is that the host team for super regional is set. So if you're a top 8 team and you lose, it's still on your field. So Baylor won't be gaining any home field advantage out of being the higher ranked seed in a super, which is unfortunate. So there is that element of a best case scenario taken out of the picture this season.
You talk about that, the element taken out of the season. My last question here for you, Noah. How screwed is Baylor baseball getting with the fact that the NCAA is announcing their regional host sites coming up in the next couple days?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate for a lot of 2 seeds, Baylor included. I think that if Baylor were to go win a Big 12 championship, there would be a lot of people saying, well, why not have Baylor as a top 16 team? I don't know where they shake up right now on the people who put the bracket together. I don't know if they're a top 25 team. I think they might be right on the fringe of that. But I think that they do have that opportunity to go take 6 of 6 from Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, then do some damage in the Big 12 tournament. I would think that we would be talking about a 1 seed for Baylor. But with the way that the seeds are announced, it's almost like it's hard to say you're not playing for anything, but it takes away the reward of, well, we can improve. Because I think it's going to be – it's easy for any team to fall to a 3 seed, but I think it's going to be a little bit harder for Baylor to fall to a 3 seed than it would be for them to rise to a 1 seed with the rest of the way. And then I think when you combine that with the super regional, taking away the element of potentially hosting as a 2 seed out the window, I think that really hurts too. I don't understand some of the decisions made by the NCAA, who does, but Baylor has gotten screwed a little bit, but you guys do have a national championship in basketball to hang your hats on. Congratulations on that.
Yeah, there it is. I love it. We'll mention that anywhere we can. Hey, really quickly here, Noah, our Bear Games question of the day for all callers and guests. Baylor baseball put up a 17-run inning on Sunday. So we talked about Monday. What's the worst team loss you've ever experienced as an athlete or maybe Little League, a coach, a fan, whatever? And then we kind of progressed throughout the week. Today's is, what is the worst individual performance you've ever put up in a competition?
Okay. I know exactly what it is. So I was an everyday starter at second base in Little League come 8th grade, I believe it was. And I remember the day was May 11th of my mom's birthday. I went out there and I just made error after error. I think I want to say it was at least 10 errors. There were no stats. It's Little League. I don't know what the stats were, but I did lose my starting job at second base. Every grounder that came my way just whizzed by me, tried to turn a double play, just drop every ball. It was just a complete disaster. Mind you, it's also like 100 degrees. This is just not going well. I think I played outfield the remainder of the season. That is easily the worst athletic day of my career.
On your mom's birthday. Wow. How selfish of you. How selfish. Hey, Noah Darling, thanks so much for joining the show today and talking college baseball. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This is a real fun time.
Absolutely. I hope to do it again soon. Again, that was Noah Darling, CWS 24/7 on Twitter. Follows closely with college baseball, and hopefully Baylor, like you talked about, Baylor can make a run later this season.